Good morning and welcome to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. Thanks for joining me today. It's on Monday, the last day of March. What a March it's been. I feel like we're in a March. When we come back, the latest on Carney and Trump. What's going on with these two? Well, there's a lot more here than meets the eye, and we'll be discussing that.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Before we get to the latest wrinkle and the Donald Trump Mark Carney relationship, and that's what it appears to be. Just some thoughts on the election. Here's what Abraham Lincoln said about freeing the slaves. This is a very famous quotation. He said, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." Now, here's what I say about ensuring that Mark Carney and the Liberals do not win the federal election. If we can save Canada by electing a Conservative majority, we should do that. If we can save Canada by electing a Conservative minority and some PPC MPs, we should do that. The objective has to be to keep Mark Carney out of office as an elected prime minister and not to give the Liberal Party another 4, possibly 5 years of a mandate. That's just wrong. They don't deserve it. And as I'm going to be mentioning later, Pierre Poilievre has to focus on change and not Donald Trump. That's the point. And David Coletto of Abacus Polling made that comment and that point in a recent column, and I'll be touching on that later. The object right now is to keep Mark Carney out of power. He's beholden to China and the globalists. And Carney can never be assumed to be working for Canada. And I've heard people say, but he's a capitalist. He believes in free enterprise. He ran a private sector company that made tremendous profits. Yeah, Mark Carney believes in profits. He believes in power. He believes in free enterprise if it works for him, but not necessarily if it works for you. Brookfield Assets Management invested in fossil fuels and pipelines around the world while he was in Canada saying, stop using fossil fuels, stop building pipelines. At the same time, he strangled Canada's energy industry. He was making profits from other countries' energy industry. And that's something, folks, we cannot ignore. That's the As I See It comment this morning. Oh, let's have a look. How did we get to this, by the way? And this says it all.
Very good conversation. Mark called me today at 10 o'clock. We put out a statement. We had a very, very good talk. He's going through an election now, and we'll see what happens. But we're going to end up with a very good relationship with Canada and a lot of the other countries. Some we probably won't. It won't be so.
Now, I've shown this to you before. And why am I showing it to you again? Because why is it suddenly Mark? Like these guys, they go back a long way. Now, this is interesting. This is why our thumbnail today is Mark Carney and Donald Trump playing cards. This is what they're doing. Mark Carney has several cards up his sleeve to face Donald Trump because of his past role in Brookfield, which has helped the American president's clan. Now, it's very true. It was reported yesterday on a couple of YouTube stations that Mark Carney helped Donald Trump out by bailing out Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law's company of apartment complex in New York City. It was now, it's very true. Brookfield Assets Management did in 2018. But that's 2 years before Mark Carney joined the company. So that can't be it. However, if you dig a little deeper, people, folks, kids, it's the refusal from Mark Carney to cooperate with a Senate investigation, which was being led at the time by a Democratic-led Senate. And while he wasn't at the helm of the financial giant at the time of the mega deal, Mark Carney was when the U.S. Senate Finance Committee began investigating the infamous $1.1 billion check that Brookfield cut to Jared Kushner's company. During his tenure, Brookfield refused twice, to provide information requested by senators. Ron Wyden, the committee's chairman, said in a letter to the firm in 2022 and seen by the Bureau of Investigation. So that is why there's a relationship between Donald Trump and Mark Carney. Donald, is that all there is to it? I don't know. But I'm looking for reasons why Mark Carney is suddenly Donald Trump's best friend. And this is the question we need to ask, because believe me, this is fascinating. Terence Corcoran just wrote this for the Financial Post, talking about Mark Carney's book that did not come out. What happened to it, you say? Well, probably badly timed. Another possible reason holding back on publishing The Hinge is that it would reveal too much detail about Carney's interventionist master plan for the Canadian economy. See, Mark Carney's running around right now pretending to be Pierre Poilievre light, just a little bit to the center of Pierre Poilievre. We really no difference at all. We already know the broad scope of the Carney vision for economic control in speeches and in his first book, Values, Building a Better World for All. Carney has laid out his objectives, which include using massive manipulation of markets via policies that use corporations and financial institutions to control investment across the economy, in everything from housing to energy and trade. That's what you would get with Mark Carney. Here's what we got with 10 years of Liberal government that was heavily influenced by Mark Carney. And there we are. Average growth rates in real GDP per capita, 0.6%. 0.6. That's not even 1%. We're just ahead of Luxembourg and Mexico. Well, that's not a very enviable position to be in, is it, folks? And that's what Mark Carney brought us in 10 years. And he's going to bring us more of the same unless we wake up and realize this guy has got a globalist agenda and it's got to be stopped. I want to talk briefly about this incredible case of Paul Chiang. And why isn't anybody complaining about this in the Liberal Party? Now, interestingly enough, calls are mounting for Carney to drop Liberal candidate who said conservatives should be turned in to the Chinese consulate to earn a bounty, $183,000 or $184,000. And apparently Paul Chiang thought it was $1 million when you turn in a dissident. Turns out it wasn't $1 million, it was $183,000. And I don't know if that would have made any difference to Paul Chiang. The point is, Paul Chiang knew he had said this, and he waited 2 months, January, at least 2.5 months, before apologizing. Let's listen to what Pierre Poilievre had to say about this yesterday.
Paul Chiang suggests that someone could hand over your party's candidate, Zhou Tei, to China in exchange for a bounty from the communist regime. Many people saw that not only as a threat to Canadian citizen and political opponent, but also legitimizing foreign interference in our democracy. What's your response to his remarks? And after his apology, do you still believe he should be disqualified from running for office? Thank you.
Yes, he must be disqualified. I find it incredible that Mark Carney would allow someone to run for his party that called for a Canadian citizen to be handed over to a foreign government on a bounty, a foreign government that would almost certainly execute that Canadian citizen. Think about that for a second. We have a Liberal MP saying that a Canadian citizen should be handed over to a foreign dictatorship to get a bounty so that that citizen could be murdered. And Mark Carney says he should stay on as a candidate. What does that say about whether Mark Carney would protect Canadians? Mark Carney is deeply conflicted. Just in November, he went to Beijing and secured a $250 million loan for his company from a state-owned Chinese bank. He's deeply compromised, and he will never stand up for Canada against any foreign regime. Is another reason why Mr. Carney must show us all his assets, all the money he owes, all the money that his companies owe to foreign hostile regimes. And this story might not be entirely the story of the bounty and a Liberal MP calling for a Canadian to be handed over for execution to a foreign government might not be something that the everyday Canadian can relate to because it's so outrageous. But I ask you this, if Mark Carney would allow his Liberal MP to make a comment like this, when would he ever protect Canada or Canadians against foreign hostility? He has never put Canada first, and that's why we cannot have a fourth Liberal term. After the lost Liberal decade, our country is a playground for foreign interference. Our economy is weaker than ever before, our people more divided. We need a change to put Canada first with a new government that will stand up for the security and economy of our citizens and take back control of our destiny. Let's bring it home.
Now, I didn't have a chance to post Sam Cooper's article, but Sam has written an article. We know Sam, he's been on the show a couple of times. He does a lot of incredible investigative journalism into what China is up to right now. And in this article, he says that China is controlling a lot of the Chinese Canadian media. So this is why a lot of these stories never go past the Chinese Canadian media. This one did. And it's becoming an incredible embarrassment for Mark Carney and hopefully Paul Chiang, who incredibly, this is a guy who was a former police officer. Does he think it's acceptable to abduct somebody, bring them against their will to the Chinese consulate, and then trade them off for cash? Does he think that's acceptable? Well, it's a huge lapse in judgment. Here's what a lot of people are saying, though, that this was written off as a joke by some people, and it was no joke.
Pressure to boot him is going to continue.
Absolutely. Vashi, look at just what has happened. You mentioned that Paul Chiang made these comments in January. But since then, China has executed 4 Canadians, right? Mm-hmm. So we still remember very clearly what happened to the 2 Michaels. What is significant about this, about Paul Chiang's comments in regards to the Conservative candidate, is that Joe Tay is considered a democracy activist. He's been outspoken on his YouTube channel in terms of pointing out all the ways that the Hong Kong government has violated civil rights. So the point of the matter is that the Hong Kong government, Hong Kong police, basically does the bidding of the Chinese Communist government. Now, they are acting on behalf of China. So right now, the fact that someone could say that, even in a joking manner, that perhaps someone should turn in Joe Tay to the Chinese consulate, first of all, not a joke at all. And the other thing is, we have to remember that democracy activists across the world have been kidnapped by Chinese agents and basically disappeared into the prison system and possibly executed. So Mark Carney has to act. The Liberal Party has to act on this, because not acting shows that they are not taking foreign interference seriously and are once again turning a blind eye, perhaps in the future, to meddling.
Mike, what are you watching for the Conservatives this week?
Wondering whether or not they'll pivot to go harder into Donald Trump.
Yes. Well, hopefully they won't pivot to go harder into Donald Trump, because that's a mistake. But that's what you want to see, how friendly Mark Carney is. If you missed this the other day, this is wonderful. This is how friendly Mark Carney is towards China, the central banks, and the Chinese Communist Party.
decide to link some of those voluntary carbon markets on the basis of the following things. High integrity in supply, so there's no greenwashing. High integrity in demand, which means that the only companies that can buy these credits are companies that are getting their absolute emissions down before they buy a credit. So they have to have ambition in their own credits. And then this market infrastructure, the plumbing, if you will, being high integrity. That's the first aspect. Last point, crucial, is just like with the post-financial crisis financial reforms, which we all participated in through the Financial Stability Board, we negotiated global standards and guidelines, but then we all went home and translated those into our own local standards. They weren't exactly the same, but they were on a common base. And it respects the sovereignty and the differences in different jurisdictions. And if we're going to have a global carbon market or major voluntary carbon markets linked, it has to be locally anchored, so tailored to local circumstance, and globally connected. And it's exactly, and this is my last point, it's exactly what the theme of this forum is you have trust and confidence because you've co-developed, you have transparency in the application, and then we can move forward on that. So this is, I think it's possible, but it's over the course of the next 12 months or so to the Brazilian COP that we will determine this.
Yeah, that's how close in the pocket Mark Carney is. Now, we've seen some depressing polls lately here. Here's the latest from Nanos tracking. This one has the Liberals at almost 44% and the Conservatives just over 36. That's an 8-point spread. I think that's wildly inaccurate. Here's another one, which is Abacus, just came out today. This has the Liberals and Conservatives in a dead heat, 39-39. But you know what? I still think there's something wrong here. How did this Conservative support just evaporate, and why Carney mania has taken over? Because I don't believe in Carney mania. I think it's completely manufactured. We'll have a look at Poilievre's rally from yesterday. Compare that to what happened to Mark Carney. Mark Carney went to his constituency, well, not his constituency office, because he's not an MP. He's just kicked out the serving MP. So his campaign office in Nepean. 50 people showed up. Now, admittedly, we just had an ice storm, but by Sunday afternoon, the roads were fine. I was on the roads yesterday. The roads were fine by Sunday afternoon. People could have dropped by. You're telling me the Prime Minister of Canada in the nation's capital can only attract 50 people on a Sunday afternoon to an event? Do you see a disconnect here? Do you see something fraudulent here? Do you really believe Mark Carney's that popular? That the Liberals have rebounded to that degree? I find it hard to believe, as they used to say on the old Get Smart show. But let's have a look at some of the rallies here.
I think that's what it means. It's different. I tell you,
all right.
Anybody who
We don't want
I think that's what it means. It's different.
No, we're saving that one. There we go.
To boot him is going to continue.
And I'm still looking for it. We will have to. Here, I'm going to show you Dan McTeague's and then get the other one. Here we go.
Let me just tell you,
This is-
engaging with Canadians.
This is a former Liberal MP, by the way, Dan McTeague, Toronto area MP, who's campaigning for Emily Brown, Conservative nominee in Burlington. And this is
Something
quite
that
interesting.
the other side, my old party, can't do. If I were comfortable that this was the same party as 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't be here. But it took people like Emily to tell me, look, give your head a shake. Things have changed. Things are a lot worse, as Mike has said, over the past 10 years. And Brian has said the same thing too. Anybody who believes that things are just fine and things are just going to continue going this way is deluding themselves. And we have a big choice in 30 days. Now, I've seen campaigns, Mike was in one, where we were leading. I remember going with my wife, we went down south of the border near, for the Christmas period. We were ahead 10%, 12%, heading to a majority government under Paul Martin. I come back, we're behind 13%. I went, what happened? And yet, things can change. The political pulse in this country is very volatile, and people will not make up their minds until last week to 2 weeks of the campaign. I'm here because I believe Emily isn't just an important candidate. I think she has to be the next member of parliament and to prove once again that some of the people over the past 10 years who had a lot to do with undermining Canada, destroying its identity, including, bringing in weird policies that have nothing to do with the Liberal Party, much less the Canadian public, need to go, and they need to be shown the door. That means, of course, Katrina has to go, and that's fine with me. But I'm going to make sure we need solid, balanced people who have their ear to the ground. Not people who block people on Twitter or on whatever profile that they have, social media, because they're afraid of hearing from every one of you in this room. By the way, I ran for 18 years. I've several campaigns. I've never seen a crowd this size for any opening of any office. So it tells me something about what's happening. That's a tribute to you, tell you, engaging with Canadians is something that the other side, my old party, can't do. If I were comfortable that this was the same party as 10, 15 years.
There you go.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada? Who's ready to stand up for me, help me to get elected here in Nepean? I can't do anything for Canada.
Now, here we are. This is with a clip I wanted to show you. It's incredible how few people show up.
I want to thank Hillary. I want to thank all of you for volunteering already a tremendous amount of time on my behalf, on behalf of the Liberal Party, and on behalf of our country. Cette élection est l'élection la plus importante de nos vies, honnêtement. This is the most important election of our lifetime. It's critical in redefining our relationship with the United States. It's critical in redefining our economy on our own terms, standing up for Canada, creating one economy, one strong economy. And I can think of no better place to build that economy out than Nepean.
Prime Minister of Canada, Carney.
Well, what a contrast. Can you have a more graphic contrast? You have Mark Carney in a room of 50, maybe 50 people begging for their support. And you have these massive rallies for Pierre Poilievre. Now, does that remind you of something, a phenomenon we recently had in the United States when Donald Trump was running against Kamala Harris? We had all of these reports of Kamala Harris having huge crowds. Apparently, a lot of those crowds were AI induced, AI created. Just like when Mark Carney's crowds during the leadership race, which was a leadership walk for Mark Carney, some of those appeared to be AI created as well. Poilievre is generating tremendous enthusiasm despite poll numbers that are not great. Now, is this Abacus poll, and I'll get back to this here for a second. Is this Abacus poll released today? Is this an indication that conservatives are rebounding? Because the last Abacus poll from a couple of days ago had the conservatives behind. And Abacus, as I say, generally is the most favorable towards the conservatives. But I discovered this morning that all kinds of government money is flowing to pollsters like ECOS. ECOS, of course, generally has more favorable results for the Liberals, for Mark Carney. But the money is flowing there. And do you think it's almost like, or maybe exactly like, what the mainstream media is doing? They're getting all kinds of government subsidies. They're getting all kinds of government money. So they're reporting the news in a way that the government that's giving them that money will find acceptable. This is no way to run a country. This is no way to run a national media. It's got to stop under Pierre Poilievre. We've got to defund the CBC, and we've got to stop the subsidies to the mainstream media. All of them. And I'll say it again. Pierre Poilievre, he needs to come on shows like this, on podcasts like this. Not, if you don't want to come on mine, fine. But come on some podcasts and talk to the people who are out there working hard for you, who are out there voting for you, who are out there donating money. You need to do that because Mark Carney is in a bubble. And he's being protected by the mainstream media. Occasionally gets a few tough questions, but it's got to get better than this, folks. Now we have, 28 days left? It's the last day. Say 29 days before the April 28th election. This is a crucial time. We need to ensure this country stays free. And as I said at the very beginning of the show, that means ensuring that we don't give Mark Carney and the Liberals a 4-year mandate. When I come back, some concluding remarks. Yes, please visit the store. Buy something if you can. I think it's some of the best merchandise out there, and I'm proud of it. And that's why I like to talk about it every day. And by the way, I'm going to have guests on the show this week. We're going to be talking about the issues that matter. We're trying to reach out to other podcasters because we need to work together for the next 4 weeks at the very least. It's very important we do that. So I encourage you to continue to fight for what's right, to continue to resolve, to resist, continue to read all the news, not just the news the mainstream media is giving you, because they're only telling you what Mark Carney wants to know right now in many cases. And April 3rd, this Thursday, a verdict And I'll say it again in the Tamara Leach, Chris Barber case. If you can go out for 10 o'clock Thursday morning to support them, I'd encourage you to do that. It's going to be an historic day. And we will get a verdict from the judge on that day. And I think we'll all be watching and waiting to see what that is. Thank you for watching today. We'll be back again tomorrow at the same time. Continue to fight for what's right.